Chapter 3, My Early Childhood. I lived in a neighborhood where there was absolutely no serious crime or drugs. As kids, we might have a fist fight. The next day, maybe even the same day, we would be hugging each other and playing marbles in a vacant field. No one stayed mad for very long. At night, doors were not locked. The screen door would be hooked to keep the wind from blowing it open. Everyone on Annie Street knew each other. Further out from Annie Street, people on neighboring streets knew each other, and we knew them. A real upside was 99% of the kids had both parents while growing up. Children went to school. Some went to public school, and others attended one of the two Catholic schools for black children. Parents looked after other people's kids. Big kids looked out for the little ones. Black folks in those days looked out for each other. We were a neighborhood. When times are tough, it really takes a village. Although we played together as kids, we did not know the last names of most of the children we grew up with. We only knew the last names of a few kids. We always addressed each other by a first name or nickname, so last names were not necessary. One kid might be Turtle over at the Blue House. Another might be, Curtis, lives over on the corner. It was a quiet neighborhood. Occasionally we'd see a police car. White police officers liked to drive with their windows down during the summer months and stare at the black children playing in the streets. I don't know what they were thinking about. We played ball and chased each other around. The girls played hopscotch and dolls and jump rope. Little dirt poor kids. What else would they be doing? I don't know how my parents managed, but Mom and Daddy kept all us kids happy. My mother was not an educated woman. She did raise 5 children and 7 grandchildren in her home on a seriously limited income in the middle of the most repressive times. It was work. Hard work. Mama learned hard work early. As I mentioned, she was taken out of school in Mississippi to help Grandpa, her father, on the farm. In the first years of the 20th century, life in the Deep South for black people hadn't changed much since Reconstruction. Work hard. Keep your head down around white people. Don't speak to whites unless spoken to, and then always a yes sir or a yes ma'am. With all those harsh lessons, Mama learned to read people and gained a life's worth of common sense. I was fortunate enough that she passed that on to me. Mama died from cancer in November of 1972 at the age of 72. Mama was a militant. I wouldn't hear that word until the 1950s and 1960s, and she never knew it. But she was a trailblazer. During my mother's lifetime, she was a strong, enduring presence. We may have been legally required to live under Jim Crow law, but we didn't have to like it. For Mama being able to shop in a white clothing store, yet forbidden to try on hats or clothing, angered her to no end. We'd hear her say that through clenched teeth, like my dollars ain't good as those white folks' dollars. Mama did not realize how aggressive she really was. She absolutely resented the fact that if she wanted a new pair of shoes or a new hat to wear to church, she had to buy them without trying them on. Our mother would openly level criticism at her relatives and friends when they purchased clothing from certain department stores that would not allow black people to try on their purchases. There were a few department stores that would allow black people to try on their purchases before paying for them. They were not located in the downtown shopping area where the high and mighty of Memphis. Those fancy white folks who didn't like to mix with black folks always shopped with their racist noses in the air. But Mama knew about voting with her wallet. She would only shop at the stores outside of downtown where she could try on the goods. Mama's brother, Uncle Henry, worked for a food company. He delivered flour and food supplies to grocery stores outside Memphis. One day, while he was loading his truck with bags of flour, He had a disagreement with his supervisor, which spilled over into an altercation. The supervisor, a white man, slapped my Uncle Henry. My uncle hit the supervisor with his fist and knocked him down. Uncle Henry was arrested and jailed. He was sentenced to 6 months in what was called a workhouse. A workhouse is a southern genteel way of saying prison. This situation caused a great deal of pain for my mother. Mama had to explain to our grandfather what happened to his son. She informed him that Henry had hit a white man. In Memphis, during Jim Crow, a black man could never hit a white man. It was against the law, regardless of the reason. It always meant jail, and jail meant beatings by cops and guards. One Sunday morning, my brother and a friend were walking. The police stopped their patrol car and got out, and one asked, "Where you two niggers going?" My brother said, We're not going anyplace, sir, just walking towards home." "Get in the car," the cop said. "We think you two guys broke into the ice cream factory last night." The cops put them in handcuffs, took them to a secluded place, and beat the hell out of them. The cops dragged their bloody bodies back into the car and drove to our home. They hauled my brother's still cuffed body up our front steps like a sack of cotton. The police entered our home without knocking. They barged right in, hauled my brother in with them, and dumped his body on the floor. One cop stood on my brother's chest. Mama began to scream. The other racist cop told my mother to shut up, and he unsnapped his gun. When Mama started screaming, I ran out the back door to church. I knew Daddy was teaching Sunday school. My father immediately left church for home. My father walked in his front door and went directly to the cops. My father was a strong man, quiet, but his strength radiated outwards. "What has my son done to cause you to arrest him?" Daddy asked. One cop gave him the ice cream story. The other said we were going to take this boy back to the car and talk to them. My brother's friend was in the backseat of the police car. They'd already been to his home where they'd intimidated his family as well. Daddy knew that talk to them was code for beat the crap out of them again. My father, with his quiet dignity, managed to convince the cops to let the boys go. He saved both from another savage, brutal beating. My father found out later that the ice cream factory had never had a break-in. The two cops wanted to stop two black guys and create a situation for them and their families. Jim Crow law allowed them to do so. It was commonplace for a cop to grab a black man or teen, cuff him, drag him somewhere, and beat him to a bloody pulp. Maybe the cop would then dump him back in the front yard. Maybe he just left a bloody man in a field to find a way home with shattered bones. Daddy lived for stability. My father did not change jobs. He was employed by one lumber company for over 60 years. He lived to see projects through to completion. After Mama and Daddy moved to Memphis, he attended Booker T. Washington Night School and finished the 11th grade. My father lived for his integrity. He created such a sense of trust that if he had a late lumber delivery, he could bring the lumber truck home with him. The white owner trusted Daddy, and only Daddy with that privilege. Daddy was a great man, a wonderful teacher, role model, and father. After he finally retired, I wanted to do something for him in his old age. Every year, I would fly him from Memphis to my home in Flint for a vacation. In 1973, I flew Daddy into Flint on his first plane ride. I buzzed down to Memphis and we flew together to my home. Daddy was captivated by flight. I loved to watch him in those first few flights. He was thrilled just to be inside of a plane. When it was time for takeoff, Daddy would stare out the window, fascinated to see the ground leave us below. His eyes would get big. I could feel his heart swell. Once back on the ground, Daddy would tell anyone, strangers, friends, waitresses in a diner, my son had me fly on this big bird. He was so proud of me that I knew my way around this world. After a few times of flying on a plane to Flint for our visits, I stopped accompanying him. He'd still be excited to tell me about the flight. "Oh, son, I was on a 737 this time," Daddy would say. "We had a little turbulence right after takeoff. In 1975, we went to Ohio's Cedar Point amusement park for a few days. Right on the shore of Lake Erie, we stayed at a local hotel, and I made sure that Daddy had his own room. One morning, we were preparing to go to breakfast, and his room was being cleaned. While we walked to the restaurant, my father leaned over and said to me, 'Son, never in my life did I ever think I would have a white maid to clean up behind me.' In 1977, we visited the city of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Windsor, just across the Detroit River from Detroit itself. It's a geographic oddity. To get to Windsor, you drive almost due south via the tunnel, and it connects the two cities. My father had never seen or experienced the procedures of going through customs. He was a little shocked at the requirements. Driver's license. Are you bringing anything into Canada? How long are you staying? What is the purpose of your visit? Daddy didn't realize that the Detroit-Windsor crossing via the tunnel under the Detroit River and the Ambassador Bridge over the river is the busiest U.S.-Canada crossing in the United States. Tens of thousands of people cross each way every day for work, and even in the 70s, billions of dollars of trade went back and forth. I also took Daddy to Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. More than 4 million cubic feet of water rolls over the top of Niagara Falls every minute. The three falls that make up Niagara are the most powerful waterfalls in the world. Daddy and I donned the tourist raincoats and walked near the base of the falls. As we walked, we saw tourists riding on board the Maid of the Mist, a 65-foot, 65-ton ship that carries 210 passengers. She's powered by twin 250-horsepower diesels to get her passengers as close as possible to the base of the 165-foot falls. "Daddy," I said, "you want to go on a boat ride?" He stared at me long and hard, his eyes flicking back and forth between me. The top of the falls and the Maid of the Mist. I recognized that look. It was the one he used on me when he was just flabbergasted at something dumb I had done as a kid. "Not today, son," he said. "Not today. It is both pride and humility that I can say that I am successful over the last 35 years of my business life by any measure. I've accumulated substantial assets, yet I missed out on two things. I desperately wanted to purchase my parents a comfortable new home in Memphis. I also wanted to give them something they never had, a brand new car with all the accessories. Sadly, they passed away before I could achieve this most important goal. I couldn't begin to repay them for all I did. But a new home with air conditioning and a loaded car would have made their later years more comfortable. When Daddy passed away in September of 1981, he was 92 years old. My older brother, Howard, became a father figure to us. Howard lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He owned a car that was not in good condition. I decided to remedy that situation. I bought Howard two nice cars, Chevrolets, both fully loaded, all the options. He loved those cars. I think it was not only that they were very nice, but that his brother had accomplished enough with his life that he could afford to give his brother a couple of expensive vehicles. My brother Howard drove to church until his health deteriorated to the point that prevented him from driving. When I was 13 years of age, my father taught me to drive. I learned on an old truck that belonged to the lumber yard where Daddy worked. It had a stick shift, and as a skinny kid, it was difficult for me to move the gear. Back in the days before synchronized manual transmissions, shifting gears was hard work. I'd have to jump on the clutch pedal with both feet, all my weight to get it to engage. Sometimes I'd have to take both hands off the wheel and yank that floor-mounted lever around. With no power steering, it took a lot of arm strength to turn that big truck steering wheel too. Trying to manage all three actions was tough, but Daddy stuck with me until he was confident in my skills as a driver. He had to. Back in the 1940s in Memphis, there was no such thing as driver education in schools for black folks. One night I got into the truck and pretended that I was driving. I pulled and tugged that big old steering wheel, stomped on the pedals, pulled the shift lever just like a real truck driver. I left the gear in this big lumber truck in neutral position and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., the truck rolled down our driveway and sped right across the street and slammed into a light pole. The light pole flew back about 6 inches. The noise from the impact was so loud it woke up the neighbors. The neighbors were so frightened. They thought the world was coming to the end. Lights exploded, power went out. It was a little bit of chaos. I never got out of bed. I stayed hidden beneath the covers after my foolishness wrapped Daddy's work truck around a pole. There was no way I wanted to face my father at 3 a.m. in the morning.